Hi everybody, welcome to another of our locked down Path to Enlightenment classes, and thank you again to Marnikam for making it possible for us to do this from our virtual Tibetan Buddhist Society temple, although that's the actual Tibetan Buddhist Society temple that you can see there live on the screen, which is nice to know. The bit with me in it, that's merely dependently existent, like all phenomena. Okay, so we'll start off this week with the prayers. We'll do the same as we have the last couple of weeks. So we'll just do the prayer of praise to Shaktimuni Buddha and the refuge and bodhichitta prayer in English and otherwise, in English and Tibetan, and otherwise we'll do all of the others of the introductory prayers just in English. So we'll begin with the prayer of praise to Shaktimuni Buddha on page 19 of the prayer book. Champa chundende dejin shepa, drachampa yandapa tsope sanje, ripadang shapsu tempa, dewa shepa jiten tempa, Jebu doe kalo jua, lana me parladan minam chitampa, sanje chundende beljawa shakya tupala shasalu churu chapsu chiwo. Teacher, Bhagawan, Tathagata, Arahant, perfectly pure and complete Buddha, all-knowing, having poise, Sugata, apprehender of the world, navigator of beings to be subdued, incomparable, teacher of gods and humans. To the Buddha, the Bhagawan, the glorious conqueror Shaktimuni, we prostrate, make offerings and go for refuge. And then the refuge and bodhicitta prayer. Sangyecho rang sochi chonam la jangchu baru danye chapsu chi dage jin soji pe sonam ji dola Sangye Dropasho. To the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. To the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, I go for refuge until becoming enlightened. Through the merit of my generosity and so on, may I achieve Buddhahood to benefit all beings. In the short Mandala Offering, which we'll do just in English. This ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, Mount Meru, the 4 continents, adorned with sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered thus, may all beings enjoy such pure lands. The 7-limb prayer on page 21. I prostrate my 3 doors with a mind of respect and offer all actually arranged and mentally emanated offerings. I reveal all the downfalls and negativities that I have ever collected and rejoice in the virtues of individuals and superiors. Please remain perfectly abiding until samsara is no longer seen. I request you to turn the vast and profound wheels of Dharma. I dedicate the virtues of myself and others to the great enlightenment. Prayer of lineage of gurus on page 23. Body born from 1,000,000 magnificent, excellent virtues, speech fulfilling the hopes of infinite beings, a mind that sees all object of knowledge precisely, I bow my head to the chief among the Shakyas. Supreme sons of the incomparable teacher, carrying the load of all the conqueror's deeds by their emanations appearing in countless realms, I prostrate to Maitreya and Manjushri. The mother of conquerors is difficult to fathom. The precise thought is in commentaries written by Jambudvipa's ornaments, Nagarjuna and Asanga. I prostrate at the feet of those most renowned in the three realms. From these two great chariots come the excellent lineages of the paths of profound view and vast deeds, their essential points gathered thoroughly and without fault. Prostration to the lamp holding this treasury of instruction. Giving explanation through compassion by seeing precisely and completely the essential points of all paths of Sutra and Tantra, holder of the conqueror's entire holy Dharma, prostrations to the glorious Losangdrugpa. I, seeing all the infinite teachings, supreme way of crossing for those entering the journey's liberation, moved by compassion to deeds skilled in method, prostrations to the spiritual masters who make everything clear. And the Great Treasury of Excellence on page 27. The kind master is the basis of all qualities, and proper reliance is the root of the path. By seeing this excellence and through much striving, bestow blessings to be devoted with great respect. This gentle support of freedom, obtained this one time, is most difficult to achieve. Knowing its great value gives rise to a mind seeing its essence constantly, day and night. Bestow blessings to generate this continuum unceasingly. It is like a bubble in water, this constantly moving body and life. Thus remember the swift collapse of death. Beyond death, like body and shadow, white and black karmic results follow after. By gaining firm certainty in this, the mass of faults, subtle and very subtle, are abandoned, and the accomplishment of all virtuous collections completed. Bestow blessings to ever retain conscientiousness. The qualities of samsara are unfit to be trusted. The door to all suffering. Do not be content with these enjoyments. By knowing its defects, bestow blessings to develop a great aspiration for the bliss of liberation. By that pure thought, great conscientiousness is drawn forth, and mindfulness and awareness of the individual liberation, the root of the teachings. Bestow blessings to make this the essential practice. Just as I myself have fallen into samsara's ocean, all living beings as mother are also like that. By seeing the responsibility for the liberation of beings, bestow blessings to be trained in supreme bodhichitta. However, by merely generating the mind, if not acquainted with the three aspects of ethics, enlightenment will not be attained. By seeing this excellence, bestow blessings to train with strong effort in the vows of conqueror sons. Pacifying distraction toward perverse objects by way of proper analysis of the perfect meaning. Bestow blessings to swiftly and continuously generate the path related to the union of calm abiding and special insight. Thus, becoming a vessel trained in the common paths, enter the Vajrayana, supreme evolution of all vehicles. Bestow blessings to engage the easy path itself, that sacred way of crossing for fortunate beings. The base of practice for the two aspects of attainment is when guarding the pure vows of commitment is found to be genuine and certain. Bestow blessings to protect them, even at risk of life. Then, by understanding properly the important points, which are the essence of the two stages of the Tantra classes, bestow blessings to practice according to these holy teachings, with continuous effort in the supreme four-session yoga. Like that, may the spiritual friend revealing the gentle path and the friends of proper practice stand firm. Bestow blessings to quickly pacify the masses of outer and inner hindrances. In all rebirths, may I never be parted from perfect gurus and the enjoyment of the glorious Dharma. By utterly completing all qualities, paths and grounds, may I quickly achieve the state of Vajradhara. So for the meditation this afternoon, since we're covering the subject of refuge, I thought it would be nice to do meditation visualization on Guru Shaktimuni Buddha. So first, taking a couple of moments to make sure that our body's relaxed. With our back straight but comfortable. Hands resting in the lap, right hand on the left palm. Our head slightly tilted forward. And ideally with our eyes half open and half closed. Elbows extended out slightly from the body. Shoulders relaxed and level. Mouth, jaw and tongue relaxed. And to settle the mind. Allow it to release all wandering to external objects of the senses, sights, sounds, and so forth. As we allow our attention to centre and gather inwards. Also allowing the wandering mental consciousness to settle. Letting go of memories of the past, plans or speculations for the future. For this short time, allowing our awareness to rest freely, simply in the present moment. As it settles on just one object, the natural rise and fall of our breath. If we find we've become distracted, on recognizing that, just gently but firmly replacing our attention, placing it on the breath. Quietly observing it as it rises and falls. Then visualize in the space in front of us at about the level of the forehead. From emptiness arises a precious throne, supported by 8 snow lions. In appearance, it is a precious throne. In nature, Shaktimuni Buddha's wisdom truth body. On top of the throne, from emptiness arises a white palm syllable, PAM. This transforms into a white lotus flower, symbolizing the mind of renunciation. The mind that turns away from suffering, from cyclic existence and its faults. On top of the lotus arises the syllable R. This transforms into a flat moon disk mandala, symbolizing the conventional mind of bodhichitta. The mind that arising from great love and great compassion aspires to enlightenment in order to liberate every living being without exception. The white moon disk emanates cool, soothing light. On top of the moon disk mandala, from emptiness arises a golden sun disk, which symbolizes the realization of wisdom. The radiant golden light from the sun disk mandala eliminates all confusion, ignorance, negative minds, and so forth. On top of the throne and these three cushions of lotus, moon and sun, from emptiness arises Shaktimuni Buddha. If we have a guru, we can think that in nature he is my kind guru. In aspect, the commitment being Shaktimuni Buddha. Or otherwise, feel that it is Shaktimuni Buddha appearing before you. Shaktimuni Buddha has one face and two arms. His one face symbolizes that Shaktimuni Buddha perceives the one nature of all phenomena without exception, their emptiness of inherent existence. His two arms symbolize the two truths. His right arm symbolizing conventional truth. His left arm symbolizing ultimate truth. His right hand symbolizes great method. His left hand symbolizes great wisdom. His right hand rests on his right knee in the earth-touching mudra, showing Shaktimuni Buddha's power to stop all negativities, especially the suffering of the three lower realms. His left hand rests in his lap, in the mudra of concentration, and holds a bowl of nectar, the nectar that destroys all delusions and especially all disease. His holy body is golden coloured. golden light natured like a rainbow. Beautiful and radiant. He is a monk wearing the 3 Dharma robes, symbolizing his pure ethics. He is adorned with the 32 major signs, such as his hands and feet being marked with wheels, and the 80 minor marks, such as copper-coloured nails. He is seated in the Vajra position, emanating countless rays of light in every direction. And so we stabilize on this visualization for a time. In Path to Enlightenment, Geshe Loden says, when you visualize Lord Buddha, you should feel that it is the real Buddha who is before you. See him smiling with a blissful appearance, radiating golden light in all directions. He has all the marks and signs of a perfect enlightened being. His omniscient mind is filled with love and compassion. And feel this is strongly directed towards you. If we find that our mind is too busy darting off in different directions, then we can slightly loosen our hold on the object, but still not holding it. Keeping our attention on Shaktimuni Buddha visualized before us. Allowing agitation to naturally subside. Or if our mind is a little dull or sleepy, and slightly tighten our concentration on the object, not pushing too hard. Finding the middle way between holding too tightly or having our concentration too loose. Simply observing the visualization of Shaktimuni Buddha before us. Brilliant, radiant, filled with love, wisdom and compassion. In his meditation instructions on the visualization of Shaktimuni Buddha, in the Calm chapter of Path to Enlightenment, Geshe Loden says, just do what you are comfortable with. In the beginning, the image may not be clear, but just do the best you can. There is no need to push yourself. Even if you cannot see the object at all, imagine that some form of shape and colour is before you. The visualization will develop slowly with practice. Eventually, you will be able to see the detail of all the colours, robes, symbols, and so forth. If we lose the visualization altogether, we can build it up again step by step. Starting with the throne, lotus, moon, sun, and so forth. Reflecting on the symbolic meaning of each element of the visualization. And then when we have a sense of the full visualization, doing our best to hold it single-pointedly. But feeling that the image is vivid and vibrant. The actual Shaktimuni Buddha. The nature of golden light. Radiating great love, great compassion to ourselves and all living beings. And in the nature of perfect, unobstructed wisdom. To finish the session, you can visualize that Shaktimuni Buddha becomes smaller and smaller. Condenses into a golden point of brilliant light. That comes to the crown of our head and dissolves into us. Feel that you are completely oneness with Shaktimuni Buddha. And to dedicate the merit of our meditation, we can think, through my practice of listening, thinking, and meditating on the path to enlightenment. And in particular, through the merit of this meditation, may I realise the perfect qualities of Shaktimuni Buddha in my own continuum. Through ripening my own Buddha potential. May I eliminate all negativities. May I develop all positive qualities. Through this, may I myself and every living being, without exception, never forgetting even one, every living being without exception, quickly be liberated from whatever suffering or difficulties they might be experiencing. May all their happiness and good qualities ripen. May we all, without exception, quickly attain enlightenment, Buddhahood, for the benefit of all. Okay. So I included some of Geshe Loden's instructions from the Calm Abiding chapter on page 814. And he gives these instructions when talking about the visualization of Shaktimuni Buddha as an object in the case of calm abiding meditation, but it's equally useful, particularly for any visualization meditation. So it's very good, wonderful, practical instruction. So we're continuing with the subject of refuge. And refuge, as we've talked about, is the first subject in the second major division of the small scope teachings. The first division being about developing our aspiration to benefit future lives, and the second section being about the methods that we actually use to achieve happiness in future lives. And those two methods are refuge and karma. So we talked about the fact that Geshe Loden's outline of the subject of refuge at the beginning of the chapter explains that it has 4 parts. So I can see this on page 277, where Geshe Loden lists the 4 headings under which refuge is explained, namely the causes of going for refuge, the objects of refuge, the ways of going for refuge, and having taken refuge, the stages of training. And we talked last week in some detail about the first of these, the causes of going for refuge, which we'll briefly recap. And we'll recall that the reason that we consider these causes is explained very succinctly on page 278, where Geshe Loden says, generally, although there are many reasons for taking refuge, the basic fact is that you do not have long to live and will soon die. Where you will be reborn after death is not in your hands. It depends entirely on karma. So that's our problem, the situation that we all face as sentient beings. The solution to that problem from the point of view of the small scope is firstly taking refuge, and secondly the subject of karma, which is explained in chapter 11. In order to understand how it is that refuge is a solution to that problem, we need to understand what refuge is. And so last week we ran through what is in effect the definition of refuge that's explained by reference to its causes. Or to put it another way, refuge is the state of mind, the aspiration that we develop as a result of having these complete sets of causes. So the first cause is by reason of having a state of mind that is terrified because we have the causes of the future suffering of lower rebirth, or because we have the causes of future suffering of cyclic existence generally, or the fact that not only we ourselves, but that all living beings without exception have the karmic causes of future suffering in cyclic existence. So to have that first cause, to be terrified of those states, is referring to the fact that we need to recognise them, to really recognise them, and to understand what their faults are. So it doesn't mean that we should be immobilised by fear or paralysed, but it means that we should have a realistic recognition of our possible future rebirth states and the limitations that they might impose on us relative to our current life of leisure and fortune. So as we said last week, this is similar, for example, to the precautionary approach that we take in worldly matters. So none of us would like to get COVID-19. For many people, it's a very dangerous disease. In some cases, it's fatal. For others, it has very negative long-term effects. So we recognise that we potentially could accumulate the causes of having COVID-19. And so what we do is seek to avoid that happening by taking action that will protect us from that. On a broader global scale, we can recognise that this Earth has the potential causes of great damage of climate change, for example. So by recognising that, by having fear of that result, of absolutely not wanting that result to eventuate, then we take preventative action to avoid that coming about. So it's that sort of mindset that lies behind this, that motivates us to take refuge. If we think about it then, so how are we going to deal with this problem of cyclic existence, as we talked about last time? That's difficult for us to figure out on our own. It's often difficult for us to sort out our own present existence, even though generally we're in very fortunate circumstances. If anybody is on this planet is well set up to achieve a state of continuous happiness and satisfaction in life, it's people who live in Australia in the 21st century, as a generalisation. We ourselves find that quite difficult, and if we find it difficult even to achieve a stable state of satisfaction and happiness in this life, given all the opportunities, then our chances of being able to secure that in any future rebirth are highly uncertain. And so in order to solve that problem, if we think about it, we can reach the conclusion that we're going to need help because we literally don't know how to avoid the possibility of a lower rebirth simply based on our own personal experience. And that's where the second cause of refuge comes in. So if we if we take refuge, then we do so based on the confident belief that the three jewels, Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, can make a difference, that they can protect us from the possibility of any of those three conditions that are referred to in the first cause. And we're confident of that not simply because we've gone along to the teaching and somebody has told us that that's what we should do, not simply because we've read a book that says that that's what we should do. We develop confident belief by our own wisdoms of listening, thinking, and meditating on these subjects, by testing them against our own experience, against our own observations of our own life and those of other people, and through introspection and seeing whether in our own experience they resonate or not. And it's through that reflection and that understanding that we start to develop the confidence-based belief that the Buddha is the source of refuge, that the Dharma is the actual refuge, and that the Sangha as the supporter of the refuge are able to assist us to realise the goal of avoiding either lower rebirth, suffering of psychic existence, and of liberating others from the experience of psychic existence itself. So those two causes of refuge, as we said last week, they are both states of mind. Refuge itself is a state of mind, and actually the point where we have real, genuine refuge is where we hold this confidence-based belief from the depths of our heart, based on being able to cultivate the realisation of refuge through very deep meditation based on calm abiding and special insight. But nonetheless, the study, the reflection that we undertake on these subjects, even at an ordinary level, in advance of being able to undertake that very deep meditation, is the support of being able to develop the actual mind of refuge. We also talked about the fact that when we say that refuge is the solution to those three problems, we shouldn't understand that in some sort of simplistic or magical way. So it's not simply that we go through a refuge ceremony and we're right. It's not simply we start calling ourselves a Buddhist or going along to a Buddhist temple, and so therefore we've taken refuge and are protected from those potential results. It's not simply because we utter the refuge formula. That's not going to solve our problems. What solves our problems is developing the genuine aspiration that refuge refers to. And again, Geshe summarises this on the top of page 279, where he says, just saying I go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha without having the causes or good reason is not really taking refuge. Just as there is no effect without a cause, your refuge does not become a true refuge unless you have the above two causes for taking refuge. So refuge is about the mind, and the way that refuge functions is that if we are able to cultivate actual refuge, it sends or sets our mind in a completely different direction from the direction that we take with our normal worldly activities. If we reflect, we can see that the way that our mind currently works, the things that it's directed to, it is dictated almost continuously by concerns of immediate attachment or aversion, or what's sometimes referred to and is explained later in the Path to Enlightenment as the 8 worldly Dharmas. So most of our activity, most of our mental activity is directed towards the short-term objectives of getting things that we like. And in terms of the 8 worldly Dharmas, that's things such as pleasure, wealth, reputation and praise, and avoiding the opposite of those things. That's the framework that tends to set the pattern for most of the things that we think about. And generally because of that, for most of the time, we have a short-term focus. We're really focused on achieving short-term goals. And because of that, it's quite difficult for us to achieve anything more than short-term results. So this isn't to beat up on ourselves in any way. It's simply a factual observation. At least it's a factual observation that I can make of my own mind, seeing the way that it works. Of course, I can't speak for anybody else. When we think about it this way, this isn't to deprecate ourselves. It's not to have a negative view of ourselves. It's not about thinking, I'm so bad, I'm simply motivated by worldly concerns, I'm only thinking about the short term. Relatively speaking, if we're trying to work on our mind to be a better person, relatively speaking, we're actually doing really, really well. But the more that we practice the path to enlightenment and understand it, the more we understand that we have the potential to be so much better than the person that we are at the moment. So what then is the different direction that refuge sets us in? So if we have genuine refuge, rather than simply being really consumed with what's happening to us right now or what's happening to us even for the rest of this relatively short life, what we see as important is framed in a completely different perspective. Because we have a much broader and a better articulated understanding of cause and effect, because the way we approach every action of our body, speech and mind is with the perspective of what type of results it can produce in future and what are the results that we want to produce in future. Because we bring that understanding of cause and effect, then our outlook and our behaviour can change radically. So that's why refuge works. It embeds into us this much bigger picture perspective than we have at the moment. If we have refuge, then our life's goals are really focused on an entirely different result. We're thinking about an entirely different time frame, and we're thinking about, in the case specifically of the Mahayana refuge, we're particularly focused on extraordinary beneficial activity, focused on beneficial activity having limitless living beings as its object. So this is something that's completely different than anything we've ever tried before at the point that we have actual refuge. Even if we have just the refuge of the small scope and genuinely hold it, then actually it's our next life that's the main game rather than this current life. And of course, that isn't to say with any of the three types of refuge or three scopes of refuge that this current life is unimportant. In fact, from the point of view of a Dharma practitioner, as we've seen from the teachings on leisure and fortune, that's completely the opposite, actually. This current life that we have right now, with the opportunities that it gives us, is the most extraordinary, valuable thing that we can have. However, as we've seen in the teachings of leisure and fortune and on death and impermanence, this extraordinary, most precious opportunity is going to be over relatively soon. And we have much more opportunity potentially to practice Dharma from the duration of our mental continuum after this life has ended than in the number of moments that we have in our mental continuum for the rest of this life. So Geshe concludes this first section just by setting out the three types of refuge that are related to the three parts of the first cause. So he explains these as, firstly, taking refuge in the three jewels in order to escape the suffering of the three lower realms, and this is the refuge of those on the path of small scope. Secondly, taking refuge in the three jewels to escape from the miseries of cyclic existence by attaining liberation, and this is the refuge of those on the path of medium scope. Finally, taking refuge in the three jewels in order to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings, to be able to lead them all into the path of enlightenment and remove all their suffering. And this is the refuge on those of the path of great scope. And Geshe Loden explains that it is this third refuge that is taken with the bodhichitta motivation of great compassion and loving kindness, that is the Mahayana refuge. In talking about refuge, we talk about the three jewels, or sometimes translated as the triple gem. And it's explained in the texts on tenets that the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha are referred to as jewels because of the fact that jewels are very precious objects. Jewels are superior objects, that is, they're very high quality objects, and also jewels are very rare. And in the same way, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha are extraordinarily precious, of the highest quality, because they are the means by which we can remove all of our suffering without exception and achieve flawless happiness. They're very rare because, as we've seen again in the teachings of leisure and fortune, in any one life, most living beings don't encounter them and don't recognise them. And some translations refer to them as the rare, superior, precious three. The next chapter is on the objects of refuge, and the next part of the chapter is entitled The Objects of Refuge, and the explanation of this begins on page 280 of Path to Enlightenment. This has two parts. Firstly, identifying the object of refuge, which is by far the bigger part of the chapter, and secondly, I think we might have had a bit of an interruption. Okay, I'll go back. So we're beginning with the second part of Geshe's chapter on refuge, which is the objects of refuge. This has two parts. One that's quite long, firstly identifying the objects of refuge, and secondly the explanation of the reasons why the Buddha is a suitable refuge. Now, in this section on identifying the objects of refuge, Geshe Loden goes through each of the refuge objects, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, and gives an initial definition and explanation of each of them. But before he does that, he gives a bit of an overview. So he makes the point that whenever we have some sort of serious problem, even in normal life, and we don't know how to deal with that problem, then we look for help. So if we have significant financial problems, then we might look for a financial counsellor. If we have issues with our mental health, then we might look for somebody who's skilled as a mental health practitioner. If we have problems with our physical health, then we look for a doctor and so forth. Like that, we also need help for the much larger and complex problem of the potential that in our next life we will experience the suffering of the lower realms, or that we will experience the suffering of psychic existence. A helper, somebody that we look to for help, who had the same sort of problem as we do, is going to be of limited assistance for us. So if we're looking to get out of psychic existence, but the person that we look to is also within psychic existence, and they have no more of a clue than we do as to how to solve this diabolical problem, they are not going to be much use to us. From a Buddhist point of view, a Buddha is a reliable helper, is a reliable source of refuge, because a Buddha has solved the problem of cyclic existence themselves. And there are a couple of aspects to that. So the first aspect of that is that a Buddha has completely eliminated all negative minds, and the thing that immediately underlies most negative minds, that is the mind of self-cherishing. From Buddha's point of view, a person who has escaped cyclic existence has no faults whatsoever. The cause of cyclic existence, of our own cyclic existence, of all living beings' cyclic existence, is our negative minds and our delusions. Because we're all within cyclic existence, we have negative minds such as anger, attachment, jealousy, resentment, confusion, and so forth. And underlying most of those negative minds, pretty consistently, is our own mind of self-cherishing, the mind that elevates our own interests and our own welfare over those of other living beings in a really disproportionate way. Even when we try to restrain that mind of self-cherishing, even when we are mindful of the interests of others, even when we're considerate toward others, nonetheless, our mind of self-cherishing is always there in the background. In fact, we need to restrain it as we go through life. If we come across a person who had completely got rid of self-cherishing, then that person would be a reliable helper for any of us. That person would never put their own wishes or their own interests above others. They wouldn't favour some people, the people that they liked, over others. They wouldn't lose interest in us. They wouldn't get annoyed with us and decide that they couldn't be bothered. They wouldn't get bored or so forth. A person who had overcome self-cherishing would be a reliable guide to help us deal with our own problem of cyclic existence. In fact, virtually all ordinary beings, we have some compassion and we have some love, but because we also have the affliction of self-cherishing, our compassion and love is conditional, and sometimes it's difficult to sustain that open heart of compassion and love. We find it really difficult to extend our compassion and love and our goodwill to every living being without exception, even though we can see that from their own side, there's no living being who is more or less deserving of our compassion and love. We can see logically that it makes no sense, that there's no valid basis for taking one living being and thinking that their happiness or suffering is important, and another living being and thinking that their suffering or happiness is unimportant. Absolutely no reason, no logical valid basis for doing that. But of course we do that all the time because we have limitation of self based on self-cherishing. So a person who is outside cyclic existence, they don't have any self-cherishing of the sort that would limit their ability to help us. Because they have no self-cherishing, they also don't have obstacles to develop great love and great compassion that motivate them to support every other living being based on seeing that every other living being fundamentally is the same as they are. If you have limitless, effortless great love and great compassion, then it's easy to develop your generosity without limit. It's easy to cultivate perfect ethics or non-harmfulness. It's easy to develop complete, perfect patience. So for us, or for any ordinary being that we might look to, there are limits on our ability to act on these good qualities based on self-cherishing, but a Buddha doesn't have these limits. So that's one reason why a Buddha is a reliable helper. The other thing, the thing that underlies self-cherishing is the more fundamental root of cyclic existence is the mind of self-grasping, or the ignorance that grasps at the inherent existence of self and others. The Buddha has also removed all obscurations to wisdom. So Buddha has also eliminated this problem of self-grasping. A person who had just done the first, so a person who had completely eliminated self-cherishing, had wonderful compassion, extraordinary great love, extraordinary generosity, and so forth, they would still be limited in their ability to help others if they didn't also have the wisdom that had eliminated self-grasping, because it's only based on that a being actually knows how to remove the root of cyclic existence, that is, the ignorance that grasps at the inherent existence of self and others. From a Buddhist point of view, though, a Buddha has eliminated all of those obscurations. So they have no obstacle based on self-cherishing. They have no obstacles based on wisdom. They have complete great love, complete great compassion, and complete wisdom. And Geshe again summarises this with a verse from Matreshta on page 280 from his 150 verses of praise, where he says, "The person absolutely never having any faults, possessing every aspect of all good qualities at all times, if you have wisdom, go for refuge to one such as this." And again, Geshe summarises this introduction at the bottom of page 280, where he says, "The three jewels of refuge can be relied on as complete refuge from the suffering of cyclic existence, because they hold the cessation of suffering and the path to cessation of suffering." And then a little bit further on, "The qualities and characteristics of the three jewels are very deep and profound subjects, and you should reflect again and again on the following explanations to gradually deepen your understanding." And that last bit, that's quite an important point. It's useful not to gloss over that, reflecting on these points over and over again, as Geshe says. So applying our wisdoms to listening, thinking, and meditation is the way to really develop our understanding of it, especially as some of the text that follows really does require some thinking about. So the next part of this section, Geshe then goes through each of the three jewels in succession, and for each of them he sets out a definition which is based on a text of Maitreya's, the sublime continuum of the great vehicle. And for each of these three jewels, he gives a separate 8-part definition that explains what each of the three jewels of refuge, what their qualities are and how they are defined. This section doesn't go so much into why these three jewels of refuge, how these qualities help us in our path to enlightenment. There's much more explanation of that in the later part of the chapter, but nonetheless, it's very useful, or at least I find as a practical measure in understanding these definitions, to think about the fact, well, why is this important? Why does this quality or that quality mean that Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha are able to help us along the path to enlightenment? So the first section on the Buddha begins on page 281, and in fact there isn't any separate outline here, but if you look at the text, you can see there are actually 4 different subjects that Geshe touches here. So firstly, he goes through those 8 qualities that come from Maitreya's Sublime Continuum. Then, in addition, over the page, he explains the important fact that a Buddha is free of the 2 obscurations. So he explains what the 2 obscurations are and why they're important. He also then explains the difference between the conventional Buddha jewel and the ultimate Buddha jewel, and that explanation also follows for Dharma and Sangha. He explains conventional and ultimate in each case. And also, in the case of the explanation of the Buddha jewel, he gives an introductory explanation of the 4 bodies of a Buddha and the qualities of a Buddha's holy body, speech and mind. But there's a lot more about that as we get deeper into the chapter. So we'll start off then on the 8 qualities, and these are summarised in Maitreya's Sublime Continuum of the Great Vehicle, where it's said that there are 8 characteristics that define the Buddha jewel. So Maitreya says these 8 qualities, they are non-produced, spontaneously achieved, not realised by the conception of others, endowed with wisdom, compassion and power. Only Buddha has the 2 purposes. So these 8 qualities are the first 6 plus the last, plus the 2 purposes that are referred to in the last line. So Geshe says, accordingly, the definition of the Buddha jewel is an ultimate source of refuge. So the Buddha is the source of refuge, where refuge comes from. The Buddha jewel is the source of refuge, having the 8 qualities of non-produced and so on. Therefore, the Buddha jewel is. And then he goes through each of these 8. So the first quality is that of the Buddha jewel being non-produced. And Geshe says this means that the nature of the Buddha is unconditioned and permanent. It's beyond birth and decay. It has no beginning or end, and is by nature pure of faults. So we might think, what does that mean? And we might also challenge that. So we might think, well, how can it be that the nature of the Buddha is non-produced? So if a Buddha is by nature non-produced, then why are we trying to attain the state of enlightenment, which is the state of Buddhahood? Isn't what we're trying to do actually to try and produce that state within ourselves? And if a Buddha is unconditioned and permanent, well, Shaktimuni Buddha was a Buddha, it's said, and we speak of Shaktimuni Buddha as having been born, as having realised enlightenment under the Bodhi tree, as having taught enlightenment, and having passed away 2,600 years ago. So how can it be the case that the nature of the Buddha is unconditioned and permanent? So this isn't a subject that Geshe covers here. It's really good, I would suggest, to think about that ourselves, to do some analysis of that. This is exactly the sort of subject where it's really good to engage in the practice of rubbing, cutting and burning. My guess is that what we're talking about here is the Buddha's nature body, which Geshe explains in detail on page 298, which does have these qualities of being unconditioned and permanent. Why would this be important? Well, as we've already said, being pure of faults, this is one of the qualities that's central to the nature of the Buddha. That's obviously important if the Buddha is going to be a reliable source of refuge. And as Geshe also explains, if this is a quality of the nature body that we're talking about, it's said to be this quality that supports a Buddha's ability to spontaneously benefit others. So again, that's really important. The second is spontaneously achieved. So Geshe says Buddhas accomplish all activities effortlessly because they are free of any limitations of conceptuality. So again, another one to look at the words closely, think about them, try and get some sort of take on what they mean, maybe read more widely. But clearly we can see at the top level that any being that could accomplish any activity effortlessly would be a very reliable support. If we think about wishing to help those around us, even in our own lives, if we could accomplish any activity that we wanted to effortlessly, obviously we'd be a lot more use to others than we are at the moment. It's interesting that here that the ability to accomplish activities effortlessly is said to be because of being free of any limitations of conceptuality. So again, that's a really interesting point to ask ourselves, what is it about conceptuality that limits our ability to effortlessly accomplish activities? The third quality is not realised by the conception of others. And what that is really saying, Geshe says, is that the qualities of a Buddha are completely beyond the conception of anybody who hasn't attained enlightenment. And he says an ordinary person couldn't even begin to conceive of a Buddha's qualities. Again, it's useful to try and really unpack that a little bit. So that means suppose we could try to imagine the ideal person. If we could suddenly conjure up the ideal person with the ideal qualities to help lead us out of our own experience of cyclic existence, show us how to remove our own negative minds, show us how to develop our qualities of great love and great compassion. If we could try and imagine the person with perfect qualities to do that, this is saying that wouldn't go anywhere near it. We can't possibly even conceive of the qualities of a Buddha and their ability to benefit others. The fourth quality is that a Buddha is endowed with wisdom, and Geshe Loden says this refers particularly to the wisdom that perceives the two truths, conventional truth and ultimate truth. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the wisdom chapter. And again, this comes back to the point that a person who's merely smart, a person who really gets it, isn't going to help us solve the diabolical problem of cyclic existence. The only person who can do that is a person who has the profound wisdom that understands the nature of cyclic existence and how to solve that problem. That is the first and second noble truths. We've already talked about the fact that a Buddha needs compassion. So a Buddha could know how to understand, could know how to remove the problem of cyclic existence, but if they didn't care one way or the other about the rest of us, then they wouldn't be much good to anybody. But it's only because a Buddha has no limitations on their ability to extend compassion to others that they are the perfect source of refuge. The sixth quality is that a Buddha has power. So they have the power to release living beings from suffering and delusions through their teaching the Dharma based on wisdom and compassion. So again, obviously this quality is essential for a Buddha to actually be able to benefit us, to actually show living beings the path. Having the two purposes, and this really wraps up the previous six. So it identifies the fact that these previous six, they sort of fall into two buckets. So the first three fall into the bucket of mainly accomplishing benefit for the Buddha. So these first three qualities, that is, of being completely pure of faults, of being able to accomplish activities effortlessly and having inconceivable qualities, that these three mainly involve the Buddha's accomplishment of benefit for themselves. The last three qualities of wisdom, compassion and power, these are the qualities that mainly reflect the Buddha's ability to accomplish benefit for others. So it's nearly 5:30, so I'll leave off there and we'll continue on with the remaining qualities of the Buddha and the other jewels of refuge in the next class. What we will do though, the next class will be in 3 weeks' time because we have a break next week for the commemoration prayers for Geshe Loden and the week after for Father's Day. There've been an accumulation of a few questions, so I figured that have come through. So I figured in the next session, what we'll do first is deal with those questions that have come through. If anybody else has questions that they'd like to send through in the meantime, then we can deal with all of those questions cumulatively. And after we've done that, we'll continue to go through this explanation of refuge. But we don't have questions, I think, this afternoon. I don't have time, and so we'll do the dedication prayers. And again, we'll do all of these in English except for the final dedication prayer. So we'll begin with the final prayer of the graduated path in English on page 31. By the two collections, vast as space, amassed with effort for a long time, may I become a chief of conquerors, a guide for all beings whose mind's eye is blinded by ignorance. Also in all lives will not yet come to that. May Manjushri favour me with his compassion, finding the supreme path, complete with all stages of the teachings. May I please the conquerors by practising well. By my precise understanding of the essential points of the path, with skillful means drawn along by strong compassion, and by dispelling the mental darkness of beings, may I uphold the conqueror's teaching for a long time. Where the supreme precious teaching has not spread, also where it has spread but become degenerate, with a mind deeply moved by great compassion, may I make clear this treasure of benefit and bliss. The stages of the path, excellently established by the marvellous deeds of the conquerors and their sons, give glory to the minds of those aspiring for liberation. May the conquerors' deeds be long preserved. May all humans and non-humans remove the obstructions and establish conditions favourable to cultivating the excellent path, never be parted for all of their lifetimes in the purest of paths which the Buddhas have praised. When someone makes effort to practice properly the 10 points of conduct of the Supreme Vehicle, may he always be assisted by the mighty protectors, and may oceans of good fortune spread out, reaching all. And then the general dedication prayers on page 34. Gelandi eche bokum sonam yeshe zo shin zo nam yeshe le jong we dam pa kunye to ba shu. By this virtue, may all beings complete the collections of wisdom and merit, and attain the two holy bodies arisen from wisdom and merit. Jangju Sam Cho Grim Boche Mam Che Panam Che Ju Chi Che Pa Nyamba Me Pa Ye Kone Kondu Pelbashu. May the precious superior mind of enlightenment be generated in those who have not yet generated it, and not decrease in those who have developed it, but increase continuously. Thanks very much, everybody. See you again on September the 12th. Hopefully see some of you before then. Take care. Thank you again to Manikam. Have a great couple of weeks. Bye.